Hey everyone, welcome back to Night Time. Today we're only going to be reading 2 cantos, so the episode is going to be a little shorter, and we're going to see how everyone likes that, if there's anyone listening at all. And if you are listening, I really appreciate it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Sit back, relax, and just listen. Canto 13. The 7th circle, 2nd ring. The violent against themselves, suicides, or against their possessions, squanderers. The dreary wood with the suicides transformed into strange trees, and the squanderers hounded and rent by bitches. Pierre de la Vigna, Lano and Jacopo da Santo Andrea, the anonymous Florentine suicide. Nessus had not yet reached the other bank when we began to make our way across a wood on which no path had left its mark. No green leaves in that forest, only black. No branches straight and smooth, but knotted, gnarled. No fruits were there, but briars bearing poison. Even those savage beasts that roam between Cesena and Corneto, beasts that hate tilled lands, do not have holts so harsh and dense. This is the nesting place of the foul harpies who chased the Trojans from the Strophides, with sad foretelling of their future trials. Their wings are wide, their necks and faces human. Their feet are taloned, their great bellies feathered. They utter their laments on the strange trees, and my kind master then instructed me. Before you enter farther, know that now you are within the 2nd ring, and shall be here until you reach the horrid sand. Therefore look carefully. You'll see such things as would deprive my speech of all belief. From every side I heard the sound of cries, but I could not see any source for them, so that in my bewilderment I stopped. I think that he was thinking that I thought so many voices moaned among those trunks from people who had been concealed from us. Therefore my master said, if you would tear a little twig from any of these plants, the thoughts you have will also be cut off. Then I stretched out my hand a little way, and from a great thorn bush snapped off a branch, at which its trunk cried out, "Why do you tear me?" And then, when it had grown more dark with blood, it again asked, "Why do you break me off? Are you without all sentiment of pity? We once were men and now are arid stumps. Your hand might well have shown us greater mercy, had we been nothing more than souls of serpents. As from a sapling log that catches fire along one of its ends, while at the other it drips and hisses with escaping vapor, so from that broken stump issued together both words and blood, at which I let the branch fall, and I stood like one who is afraid. My sage said, wounded soul, if earlier he had been able to believe what he had only glimpsed within my poetry, then he would have not set his hand against you. But it's incredibly made me urge him to do a deed that grieves me deeply. But tell him who you are, so that he may, to make amends, refresh your frame within the world above, where he can still return. To which the trunk, your sweet speech draws me so that I cannot be still, and may it not oppress you if I linger now and talk. I am the one who guarded both the keys of Frederick's heart and turned them, locking and unlocking them with such dexterity, that none but I could share his confidence, and I was faithful to my splendid office, so faithful that I lost both sleep and strength. The whore who never turned her harlot's eyes away from Caesar's dwelling, she who is the death of all, and vice of every court, inflamed the minds of everyone against me, and those inflamed then so inflamed Augustus that my delighted honors turned to sadness. My mind, because of its disdainful temper, believing it could flee disdain through death, made me unjust against my own just self. I swear to you by the peculiar roots of this thorn bush, I never broke my faith with him who was so worthy, with my Lord. If one of you returns into the world, then let him help my memory, which still lies prone beneath the battering of envy. The poet waited briefly, then he said to me, since he is silent, do not lose this chance, but speak and ask what you would know. And I, do you continue, ask of him, whether you believe I should request? I cannot, so much pity takes my heart. Then he began again. Imprisoned spirit, so may this man do freely what you ask. May it please you to tell us something more of how the soul is bound into these knots, and tell us, if you can, if anyone can ever find his freedom from these limbs." At this, the trunk breathed violently. Then that wind became this voice: "You shall be answered promptly. When the savage spirit quits the body from which it has torn itself, then Minos send it to the seventh maw. It falls into the wood, and there's no place to which it is allotted. But wherever fortune has flung that soul, that is the space where, even as a grain of spelt, it sprouts. It rises as a sapling, a wild plant, and then the harpies, feeding on its leaves, cause pain, and for that pain provide a vent. Like other souls, we shall seek out the flesh that we have left, but none of us shall wear it. It is not right for any man to have. And what he himself has cast aside, we'll drag our bodies here. They'll hang in this sad wood, each on the stump of its vindictive shade. And we were still intent upon the trunk, believing it had wanted to say more, when we were overtaken by a roar. Just as the hunter is aware of chase, and boar as they draw near his post, he hears the beasts, and then the branches as they crack. And there upon the left were two who, scratched and naked, fled so violently that they tore away each forest bough they passed. The one in front, "Now come, death, quickly come." The other shade, who thought himself too slow, was shouting after him, "Lano, your legs were not so nimble as the jousts of Topo." And then, perhaps because he'd lost his breath, he fell into one tangle with a bush. Behind these two, black bitches filled the wood, and they were just as eager and as swift as greyhounds, but they have been let off their leash. They set their teeth in him where he had crouched, and piece by piece those dogs dismembered him and carried off his miserable limbs. Then he who was my escort took my hand, and he led me to the lacerated thorn, then wept in vain where it was bleeding, broken. "O Jacopo," it said, "da Santo Andrea, what have you gained by using me as screen? Am I to blame for your indecent life?" When my good master stood beside that bush, he said, "Who were you, who through many wounds must breathe with blood your melancholy words?" And he to us, "O spirits who have come to witness the outrageous laceration that leaves so many of my branches torn, collect them at the foot of this sad thorn. My home was in the city whose first patron gave way to John the Baptist. For this reason, he'll always use his art to make it sorrow, and if, along the crossing of the Arno, some effigy of Mars had not remained, those citizens who afterward rebuilt their city on the ashes that Attila had left to them, who would have travailed in vain, I made of my own house my gallows place." Canto 14. The seventh circle, third ring. The violent against God. The first zone. Blasphemer supine on fiery sands. Capaneus. Virgil on the old man of Crete, whose streaming tears form the rivers of hell. Acheron. Phlegethon, Styx, and Cocytus. The sight of Lethe postponed. Love of our native city overcame me. I gathered up the scattered boughs and gave them back to him whose voice was spent already. From there we reached the boundary that divides the second from the third ring, and the site of a dread work that justice had devised. To make these strange things clear, I must explain that we had come upon an open plain that banishes all green things from its bed. The wood of sorrow is a garland round it, just as the wood is ringed by a sad channel. Here at the very edge we stayed our steps. The ground was made of sand, dry and compact, a sand not different in kind from that on which the feet of Cato had once tramped. O vengeance of the Lord, how you should be dreaded by everyone who now can read whatever was made manifest to me. I saw so many flocks of naked souls, all weeping miserably, and it seemed that they were ruled by different decrees. Some lay upon the ground, flat on their backs, some huddled in a crouch, and there they sat. The others moved about incessantly. The largest group was those who walked about, the smallest, those supine in punishment, but these had looser tongues to tell their torments. Above that plain of sand, distended flakes of fire showered down. Their fall was slow, as snow descends on Alps when no wind blows, just like the flames that Alexander saw in India's hot zones, when fires fell intact and to the ground on his battalions, for which, wisely, He had his soldiers tramp the soil to see that every fire was spent before new flames were added to the old. So did the never-ending heat descend with this. The sand was kindled just as tinder on meeting flint with flame, doubling the pain. The dance of wretched hands was never done, now here, now there. They tried to beat aside the fresh flames as they fell, and I began to speak. My master, you who can defeat all things except for those tenacious demons who tried to block us at the entryway, who is that giant there, who does not seem to heed the singeing? He who lies and scorns and scowls, he whom the rain can't seem to soften. And he himself, unnoticing that I was querying my guide about him, cried, That which I was in life, I am in death. Though Jove wear out the smith from whom he took in wrath, the keen-edged thunderbolt with which on my last day I was to be transfixed, or if he tire the others, one by one, in Mongebello, at the sooty forge, while bellowing, "Oh help, good Vulcan, help," just as he did when there was a war at Phlegra, and cast his shafts at me with all his force. Not even then would he have happy vengeance. Then did my guide speak with such vehemence as I had never heard him use before. O Capaneus, for your arrogance that is not quenched, you're punished all the more. No torture other than your own madness could offer pain enough to match your wrath. But then, with gentler face, he turned to me and said, That man was one of 7 kings besieging Thebes. He held, and still it seems holds, God in great disdain, despising him. But as I told him now, his maledictions sit well as ornaments upon his chest. Now follow me, and take care. Do not set your feet upon the sand that's burning hot, but always keep them back closest to the forest. In silence we had reached a place where flowed a slender watercourse out of the wood, a stream whose redness makes me shudder still. As from the Bullocane pours a brook, whose waters then are shared by prostitutes, so did this stream run down across the sand. Its bed and both its banks were made of stone together, with the slopes along its shores, so that I saw our passageway lay there. Among all other things that I have shown you, since we first made our way across the gate, whose threshold is forbidden to no one, no thing has been yet witnessed by our eyes as notable as this red rivulet, which quenches every flame that burns above it. These words were spoken by my guide. At this, I begged him to bestow the food for which he had already given me the craving. A devastated land lies in mid-sea, a land that is called Crete. He answered me, Under its king the world once lived chastely. Within that land there was a mountain blessed with leaves and water. They called it Ida, but it is weathered now like some old thing. It once was chosen as a trusted cradle by Rhea for her son. To hide him better, when he cried out, she had her servants clamor. Within the mountain is a huge old man who stands erect, his back turned toward Damietta, and looks at Rome as if it were his mirror. The old man's head is fashioned of fine gold, the purest silver forms his arms and chest, but he is made of brass down to the cleft. Below that point he is of choicest iron, except for his right foot, made of baked clay, and he rests more on this than on the left. Each part of him, except the gold, is cracked, and down that fissure there are tears that drip. When gathered, they pierce through the cavern's floor, and, crossing rocks into this valley, form the Acheron and Styx and Phlegathon. And then they make their way down this tight channel, and at the point past which there's no descent, they form Cocytus. Since you are to see what that pool is, I'll not describe it here. And I asked him, But if the rivulet must follow such a course down from our world, why can we see it only as this boundary? And he, to me, You know this place is round, and though the way that you have come is long, and always toward the left and toward the bottom, you still have not completed all the circle. So that if something new appears to us, it need not bring such wonder to your face. And I again, Master, where's Phlegathon and where's Leith? You omit the second and say this rain of tears has formed the first. I'm pleased indeed, he said, with all your questions. Yet one of them might well have found its answer already, when you saw the red stream boiling. You shall see Leith, but past this abyss, there where the spirits go to cleanse themselves, when their repented guilt is set aside. Then, he declared, "The time has come to quit this wood. See that you follow close behind me. These margins form a path that does not scorch, and over them all flaming vapor is quenched.